who operate on a global, collaborating on a global.
Okay. All good to go? Good timing. I'm Helen Cluff, and I'm a Knowledge and Learning Operations Manager at Herbert Freehill. So Herbert Freehill is a global law firm. It's got about 4,000 people and 450 partners across 25 countries in the world. I've worked at Herbert Freehill for about 10 years. I went in as a research librarian and then managed the Sydney Knowledge and Research Centre. Then after we merged in 2013, I worked for 2 years in the London office managing the London research team and EMEA. Elizabeth is at HWL Ebworth Lawyers. It's a large Australian, it's actually quite large, big law, Australian law.
But national.
National?
Yeah. So we've got offices, offices in every state, and I manage the library and I do a lot of induction and CPD training as well. So.
And you're a solo librarian? I'm
a solo librarian in a firm with about 1,400 staff all up.
Huh. All lawyers? Oh, well, not all lawyers.
No, that's professional and support staff. Yeah.
All right. So, what I want to know first is what sort of teams do you work in? Who are you? Are any of you solo? One, but you collaborate a lot. I know.
I collaborate a lot. Yeah, but not with people.
Okay.
What do you collaborate with? Elephants.
No, the people at work.
Yeah.
So at TAFE, I don't really collaborate with. I talk to people.
Yeah.
And I hang out with people, but I don't collaborate with the people
at work. In teams at work.
No,
yep. So you collaborate with other organisations, other teams,
yep.
Maybe, right?
I'm a school librarian, so it's just me and an assistant. So
yep.
Library in a school.
Do you work with other people? Like, do you have the opportunity to work with other organisations or other teams?
Oh, with teachers, yeah.
Yep.
Teachers, yeah,
Yep.
but no other library.
All right. Who's in a group or a work team? Works in a team. Yeah. So what sort of team? Are you all in the same office? Anyone?
No.
No?
Remote and main office.
Yep. Dispersed?
Yep.
Geographically dispersed? So across different areas, different, yeah? All right. Anyone in a global team? Software?
Also software Koha,
Okay. Nice.
which is the library management system.
Yeah, it is. All right, so very good. All right, so a global team it has the same characteristics as all teams. And you've all got some sort of experience working with teams, good and bad. But a global team is characterised by that geographical distance. It's characterised also by ethnic and cultural difference. It's also categorised by time zones, different languages, those sorts of things. All right, so bear with me. So one of the things, cultural difference, is I just recently finished a project with our Indonesia office, and we had to finish that before Ramadan started. So that was an important thing that we had to take on when we took that project on. Our firms merged in 2013. So prior to that, we were a big Australian firm. After that, we were a massive global firm. We merged with Herbert Smith, who was a large UK firm. When we merged, I was managing the Sydney Library, or Knowledge Centre, because it's knowledge management. So we formed groups and we sat down and we tried to work out, in the weeks and months after we merged, what would it take to create a global research service? What did we need to know from all the different jurisdictions and those sorts of things to create something that could operate globally. All right. So we launched into global teams through that. So we did 2 large bodies of work. One was we looked at our collections, our subscription, was 3 really, subscriptions and our research services in the different areas. From that, we formed 2 large global projects. One created a global collection development policy and implemented a global library catalogue, all right, making what we had available accessible to everyone across the network. The other one looked at our global research service, or services, and implemented a global reference management system, all right? I haven't got the stats on that, but 3 months after we implemented that, we cracked 10,000 requests, all right? So we do a lot of work, all right? A law firm, any law firm, you think it's just going to be bad lawyers, you know, like, bad lawyer jokes around. But it's actually, they ask really interesting questions. They're constantly sort of challenging law, you know, like, so it does make for interesting work. It's not just, and there's a lot of it. So even if you don't know it, there's enough there to practice on. So, all right. Now, our research service is, we've got a group of librarians in Australia across 4 offices. We've got a large team in London. We've got a team in Indonesia, Hong Kong, Paris, Madrid, and Moscow. That's our research team, okay? And I can't remember where I was going next. So from that, I know it was. So we've got language differences, we've got office culture differences, we've got time zone differences, all that sort of thing. So one of the benefits of having those global projects really kick-started us in collaborating globally, okay? So we had to, so you think English and Australian, it's a common language, it's English, but it is so not, you know? As soon as you use the word pants or thongs, it's all over, okay? So having projects actually gave us, I forgot to set the timer, having projects gave us a common language called Project Speak, okay? And it was good to actually sort of have that in common. The other thing that we did was we created a glossary to explain the differences and the different terminology that we had. Yeah. Since then, I've operated in lots of global teams across the group, and I was lucky enough to go to the UK for 2 years. So I was able to form that rapport and tread on every single cultural and language landmine there was in person, all right? Now, one of the hardest things to do in a global team is form that rapport, all right? Because forming a rapport is best done in person. You can smell the person, get to know their idiosyncrasies. You can see me doing these, which you can't see on a phone, those sorts of things. You rarely get that opportunity in a global team, very rarely. And the chances of taking something the wrong way because of our language differences, our cultural differences, our relationship with power or people in power, you know? So in some groups, you will actually never get somebody, never get that team argue back at you when you have said something stupid because you're higher in the hierarchy than them, all right? So, and that can be quite disabling if you're trying to get something done, you know? Anyway, so one of the biggest things that I learnt to do, apart from the glossary, and finding the right time to meet, those sorts of things, which are just logistics, really, was sitting down with the group when they first got together, using whatever technology there was, whether that was a phone. It's always good to have a bit of FaceTime, but that's not always available, especially in Hong Kong or Indonesia, where the speeds and streaming is really difficult and makes it awful. I sat down and we came up with this thing called assumption of good intentions. All right? So your chances with the language, cultural, of misunderstanding what somebody has said and how they've said it and what they mean are really high. All right? So I will always ask the team to assume that that person had good intentions when they said it or when they sent their email. All right? If they were still not quite sure, right, they had to step back from that precipice and come and see me. And I would get to the bottom of it and smooth that out. And it actually made things work a lot better, just something simple like that.
Excellent, thank you, Helen. Thanks, Helen. I wanted to thank Helen for asking me to be involved in this session today. What I'm going to talk about actually dovetails quite well in with what Helen was talking about. It's based on my part of what our presentation is based on a presentation I did earlier this month at the Unconference in Darwin. So you might say, okay, you're a solo librarian, how does that work? And well, may you ask. So part of my experience here is based on not only what I've done prior to what I'm doing now. So I've worked in higher education, I've worked in a global law firm before, I've worked in Commonwealth government, and so on. So I've had various experiences, but one of the experiences that was the catalyst for me writing the paper that I delivered at ALA was that I was on the board of the Australian Law Librarians Association, and one of the great things about ALA is that it achieves a lot from very little, like you guys are doing here with co-collaboration today. Okay, you're going to achieve a lot of learning from, from very few resources, and that's what ALA does too. So we, during my time at ALA, we actually implemented technologies that would make it easier for the board to operate. We started using, various software packages and so on to make it easier. So I just wanted to talk about, because my my paper that I wrote is very much based in, there was a lot of input from the literature, so I did a lot of work with the literature. It's very hard to sort of cover all that today, but some of the things that I was going to talk about, let me make sure that I've got these to hand. There's a couple of things. That's okay. It's got them there. Okay. So Helen brought up a few things to do with how you might make a team successful. And one of the things that Helen talked about was sitting down with people and setting some rules about which they would operate. Okay, so setting ground rules, most of you would be experienced in doing that, and that would generally happen as part of an induction process. So that's a time when you actually get to lay the foundations for your team. So that's something to pay a great deal of attention of. If anybody's interested, I can give them some references for things, for literature that will help with that. So as Helen pointed out, distance, you can get a lot of benefit from distance, but it also can be quite challenging. So you can get problems associated with cultural impacts, with people not meeting each other, and with people interpreting communication. So Helen's already covered that quite well. So those are sort of some pitfalls that you've got to take into account. But of course you get your skill sets that you might not get in other areas. So, and people get to contribute in a broadly networked team, whether it's global, whether it's national, whether it's interstate, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. But people get to have their say, and that's what we were doing with ALA, was making sure that people could be involved regardless of where they were. And I think we've done, one of the factors with ALA board that we really encountered was the problem between the time distance between Eastern Seaboard and Western Seaboard. because board meetings would often be at lunchtime, but that was never lunchtime for Western Seaboard. So the little things like that you do have to take into account. But I think the things that, in terms of success factors, other things that Helen has already identified is the communications, setting rules, being trusting, being collaborative, and that's where I bring in this report. If you haven't, I actually finished writing my paper and then I saw on breakfast television them mentioning this Deloitte report. It's called The Rise of the Social Enterprise. I recommend it to you. It's easy to get and download. If you just Google Deloitte Rise of the Social Enterprise, you'll be able to get a hold of that report. It's very, very useful because basically it talks about, and there was a talk by Bernard Salt the other day, and what they're all saying is that upskilling is important, continuous learning is important, but in the modern enterprise, one of the most important skills that you can have is simply getting on with other people, because pretty much every other skill you can learn. So you can be trained, you can be inducted, you can take responsibility for your own learning, but if you can't get on with other people, that's not so good. It's not going to work for you. So they're not really looking for super duper skill sets. Your skill set is great, but what you've got to bring to the table is your ability to achieve goals through other people. So that's what we've all got to do, is work on that. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about success factors and induction, but some of the things that I identified is that what you also need to bring to your team, and Helen also touched on that, is the ability to think critically. Okay, you develop your critical thinking skills. So you're no good if you're on the team and you never say boo to a goose. Okay, you've got to be able to do various things, and some of them are, so identifying what people's opinions and arguments are, what they're saying, weighing them up, weigh up the evidence, try and be fair and even-handed in your way of doing that. Also looking at the way people are communicating and seeing if there's anything that's not being said, okay, that you might need to bring up and bring to the forth. Think about if people are using persuasive techniques to get their argument through at the cost of others. Doing your information synthesis, which everybody who's got LIS qualifications is pretty good at. And presenting your own point of view, which people with LIS is not so good at generally. So, you have a right to your own say within the team, because that's what you're there for. You've got some real estate in the team and you want to use it. So those are the kinds of things that we can work at. One of the authors that I included in the paper says that it's a really good idea to have a little touch of skepticism. So what they call is bringing an element of polite doubt to the team. So you don't have to take everything at face value. You can ask clarifying questions. Okay. But you also have a responsibility to evaluate your own thinking and to moderate your own behaviour within the confines of the team, so that you can, question, but not completely disrupt and break down team functioning. That's not helping anybody either. Just to, I know time's getting away, just to touch on some of the things that can really create problems. Team cohesion, there's a general line of thinking that, we want the team to be cohesive, and you do, but you don't want the team to be so cohesive that, again, that not being able to question things because they don't want to be seen as going outside the ambit of what the team should be achieving. So cohesiveness is good, we're heading towards a goal, but we don't want to be so cohesive, like the Three Musketeers, all for one, one for all, and D'Artagnan's leading them off into some dreadful mishap. What we want is more kind of Goldilocks, so just right. So you can question and you can, put forward your opinions, but you don't want to kind of fit in as good but not So there's a balance there. It's probably an art form, maybe with something that we'll all work on forever. So cohesion. So there's some other stuff about things like groupthink. So overly cohesive team, you get groupthink. So, you know, people are thinking, you know, I'll have what he's having kind of thing. So that's kind of the flip side of that cohesion is you're going down a path and it may be the wrong path, but everybody's heading there. So there's a few things about, you know, decision making. In the worst case scenario, if you get an overly disruptive team, then you might get failure to decide, so you won't actually get your decisions done. The other one is you know, I go into this in a fair bit more in the paper, Abilene paradox, which is somebody says, why don't we, if nobody's ever heard of the Abilene paradox, this is actually a true story. The guy wrote a whole paper about it. And what happens is families sitting, this is in the States, there's a town called Abilene in the States. This was about 40 k's from where this guy lived. Okay, so his surname was Harvey. I can't remember his Christian name. It's just one of those things. You know, dad's sitting, mum's sitting there. It's all, you know, they're dying of heat in the summer, dust storms, everything happening outside. But the dad decides that they've all had it sitting at home. They're bored. He says, "How about we go into Abilene for dinner?" So everybody thinks, "Oh, well, that's what Dad wants." So off they get in the car and they have this dreadful journey, and dust storms, horrible, dreadful dinner. Everybody treks home again. And what happens is once they get home, they think, "Oh, God, you know, every temper's afraid, everybody's frustrated. Frustrations come out. Turns out that nobody really wanted to go there, but nobody wanted to say to the other person, we didn't want to do that. Can't we just sit tight with a mint julep in the living room with the wireless on and, you know, stay put?" So that's a little bit about Abilene paradox. So there's a few things that can cause problems in group dynamics. Okay, how are we going? Good.
When are we finishing?
Oh,
About 10 minutes.
yeah, 10 minutes.
All right, we want to fly forward again.
Fly forward again.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I think Elizabeth's paper was on virtual teams, lessons from the literature and the coalface, and she presented that at the Unconference in Darwin with to great acclaim. She'll also be publishing that in the Australian Law Librarians, what's it called?
Yeah,
Journal?
Yeah.
Australian Law Librarian.
It's just called the Australian Law Librarian,
So, shortly, I think that should come out in a month or two. So, but yes, it was very interesting to get into the literature because, as you can tell, mine's all just, I've done no rigour. Mine is just from experience. Cluffisms. Okay. But one of the things that I did want to sort of finish with is that collaboration is a really good way to work. I really like it. It suits the way that I work and it suits the way I think, right? But you do have to work at it. It's not something, for some people, yes, it does come naturally, but you don't just collaborate for the sake of collaborating unless you're learning how to collaborate. You actually need to achieve things. So collaboration is, now I looked it up and I'll try and remember it. It's where people achieve things together that they can't achieve on their own. All right? So there's some good things that come with it. I love design thinking. I love ideation. You know, I love they're all words for brainstorming, those sorts of things. And I think when you get a good, diverse team, you get all sorts of those different perspectives that come in to solve a problem that you would solve in almost a completely different way if you did it on your own. All right? So there are really good benefits from it. I feel that I achieve more in collaborating. And I feel good personally from that. You know, it just feels good to sort of work with people. Not everyone is built like that, though. Okay. But it's not all good. So
Can I ask you about the various roles? Because from my experience, you do have to have a very energetic person who is very service orientated.
You've got to have.
You have the others
Yeah.
who, you know, you become a personality in relation to the others within the group.
You do. You
I
do.
wondered if you could address that from
You
your
do.
experience.
You do. We're moving around a bit too.
No, that's
so.
okay.
So one of the main success factors is that strong leader, and that leader needs to be somebody who can read how the group's doing, what the dynamics are doing. That there are people that are doing things, other people that are saying things. If you think about extroverts and introverts, right? I'm an extrovert, right? But most when I think of different cultures, and because I've managed in library teams, I've worked with introverts quite a lot, all right, and grown up with introverts quite a lot because I've spent a lot of time in a lot of libraries and other places. It's not all librarians. And so one of the things in any meeting or any sort of group dynamic is that you, as the leader, you need to give space to people who are different from you and who communicate in different ways to contribute into the group, all right? In a way that makes them feel comfortable and it will benefit the group overall. I know this is a bit odd, but I tend to treat different countries, so definitely most of the people I met in the UK, I treated as if they were introverts because of the cultural difference. Because I would actually have face-to-face meetings, you know, and sit there and go, you've all just agreed with me. I've just said something really stupid about changing our name from librarian, and you're all just going to agree, you know? It's like, until you change my mind, that is what I'm going to make happen, you know? Like, they just went, I said, you can change my mind in all sorts of ways, and I can guarantee you it's very easily changed on this one. So anyway, we got there. So it's those sorts of things, but you need that strong leader to pick it and to pull that and to keep the team going into the thing. There are drawbacks for collaboration, and they are the time you spent in meetings and in, if it's a global collaboration, out of hours. All right. It's also, it takes you away from actually doing your work sometimes, you know, like it's depending on what it is. You can spend all your time in meetings talking about actions that nobody has the time to do. That's going to be it's a setup for a failure. And the other drawbacks of collaboration is that there can be a gender bias. All right, so women are more suited to collaborating, and there's a burnout associated with over-collaborators or oversharers. So
in your organisation, then do you have a time period for people to be in their role?
Not really. I mean, my role is global, so I probably operate more flexibly than anybody. Do you mean time that we have meetings?
Every time there's a release, then we elect whoever is going to be having, the various roles. Because
Maybe we don't tend to formalise that unless it's a project itself. So in a project, yes, we have different people that are responsible for different things. Any project, if there's actions to be done, and it's particular for when you've got a diverse team who have different ways that they deal with things that aren't written down, maybe, is that if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So is that you need to have those clear actions, and you need to have somebody who is responsible for making it happen by a certain time. You know, like that. For me, that's more project work or project than actual collaboration. It's anyway. But it's also, with the oversharing or the over-collaborators, there's a study in 2016 that showed that I think it was 1/3 of the organisations that they surveyed about 1/3 of the value add collaboration came from 3 to 5% of the employee base. All right. So for those really good go-to collaborators or over collaborators, the chance of burnout there is quite high. You know, like it's sort of, it's like, oh yeah, I can help you, I can help you, yeah, I can help everyone. You know that, so yeah. So they're just some of the drawbacks, I think. You need to be aware that it's not all there. The other thing that I got from the Deloitte article was the future of work and the future of the way that we work. I'm really quickly on this one. There's different, and I'm just about to go into some tools. So the difference is, there is a difference between connecting and collaborating. Connecting is putting a person with another person who they can go off and collaborate then. So some of the tools around that are things like Yammer, things like Skype. You know, like they're tools that actually help you connect with another person. They're instant messaging, they're Twitter, they're things like that.
Communication tools.
Communication tools, there's heaps of them, you know. You're tripping over a new one every day.
Yeah.
But you've also got those collaboration tools which help you share documents and work on things together. Now I'm going to put Skype in this as well, because it will actually help you get that FaceTime together to get things done. You can share your screen and things like that on it. You need to have some FaceTime somehow, if you can. Yep, synchronous and
Yeah.
Google Hangout.
Google
Yeah.
Hangouts, Evernote,
yeah, FaceTime,
Slack, you know, all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff.
data, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like, so you need to have those tools for it. You can go phone. Phones are good, you know, like, but it is just a phone, you know, like, so you need to augment it where you
I
can.
think in my previous life I was in IT and I dealt with a company in Boston, the programmers, and I was the analyst, so I had to describe what I wanted done, and just having the phone,
Yeah.
I didn't find it was enough. There was a bit of a barrier
It's not,
there.
yeah.
To really over
You need to-
explain things.
See, I use Skype on the research desk
Yeah.
as well. You know, like where you've gone, so what screen are you looking at? All right, are you at that screen yet? Can you see the login button? Oh, no,
Yes,
it's
that's
under
right.
that, you know,
Yes.
so to avoid that, you use tools like that just in your day-to-day work.
And we use, I don't know whether anybody has here, you know, I mean, a lot of people would use various kind of shadowing tools. So we use one called Director at work, where you actually will, so you'll be controlling the screen. And our IT people use it to fix people's problems. I use it to train. So, you know, doesn't matter where the person is, I can share their screen and we'll do the same thing together. So we can, you know, you can both use the mouse simultaneously and so on. So, yeah.
Sorry, we did actually have a presentation. Just working through that.
We're just, going free for all. Just while Helen's collecting her thoughts, one of the things I was going to say is in our conference in 2016, we had a very good presentation from Rose Hiscock, who some people might know. Where's she from? She was the
Director of the Powerhouse.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, and she talked about, instead of, you know, using dry business narrative, she talked about telling a story. So achieving your goals through weaving more of a narrative and kind of hooking people's emotions into things and so on. And so I bought this book, and this is a really good book, and I do refer to it in my paper. It's called The Leader's Guide to Storytelling. So if anybody's interested in that, because I wasn't a natural storyteller, I found this quite useful. I really feel I need to read it again now, but you know, rather than just presenting everything in a dry way, to get more of that storytelling influence.
Can I
Yes.
ask you, though, you know, I'm a natural storyteller.
Right.
So I find that when I'm with software engineers, they actually say,
Yes,
just tell me
they
what
just want the facts.
outcome
Yeah,
is. Don't
because it's a
take
different
your own
audience.
story
Yeah.
to it.
It's a different
Kind of
audience.
building
Yeah.
an image, there's a picture and a vision
Yeah.
for them, and they say, you know, we did want, how do you want the data sorted and where?
Yeah.
All these kind of
Lawyers are a
engineers-
lot more, they want the facts.
They do want the facts. Yeah.
They don't care about the vision.
Yeah.
I mean, different. You'd
It's
have to
a
pick
gender-
what you were doing for different audience, but I just think because I was a very, very factual person, and not everybody works like that. And you know, so there are different audiences that you do need to weave more of a narrative into it, you know, and you will know, you know, by experience what's going to work for who. But for people who need to actually be more, you know, be less clean cut in there, because that can put people off too if they don't understand a bit more of the whys and wherefores. Then this is one resource that you might want to consider.
We're going to finish up with this. Has everyone seen this though? Because I won't play it otherwise. But this is basically pretty much every video, a lot of video conferences that I've been on.
Hey Paul, thanks for being here on time. Paul? Hey Paul, can you hear me? I can't hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hey guys.
Hey Tyler.
Sorry I'm late. Having a hard time connecting.
1 second. Paul's having a sound issue.
I can't hear you. Try adjusting your output settings.
Can you hear me?
It's the gear icon.
Tyler, are you on hotel Wi-Fi?
Yeah, right.
Never mind, I got it. I just had to change a few settings.
Great. Get started then. Oh, great.
I think your mic is not in your speakers.
My mic?
Do you have headphones?
Going to put them on?
No, smell them. No. Hey Beth,
Hey everyone, sorry
Well,
I'm
you've got to
late.
be
I'm
careful.
downloading a version of the platform.
you should plan extra time for the updates. There's pretty much one every time.
Sounds like someone just joined.
Hey guys, it's John. I had to call in. I'm stuck in traffic. Have I missed anything yet?
No, it would have been nice for you to join the rest of us, but we'll see you when you get home. All right, while everyone is here, finally, Tyler, do you have that financial report?
Well, it's been the last few weeks updating our reports, and got some great news for you. Scheduled from this point last year. We had a great Q1.
We lost Tyler, I think.
Am I frozen? Hey, Trip, I think we lost Tyler.
Yeah, I know, we lost Tyler.
Hey guys, it sounded like Tyler was cutting out.
No, John. All right, while we wait on Tyler, why don't we go over all of the reports? Beth, are you with us?
Oh yeah.
Okay, everyone, I know some of you have to leave soon, but I just wanted to go over a couple of the areas before. Oh, okay. Excuse me. My wife's out of town. Daddy's, I'm so sorry. Okay, you just spilled grape juice on the carpet. Daddy's in a meeting. Tyler, can you go over the numbers one more time, please?
Fine. Beth had an adjustment. Hey, Beth.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, that's my iTunes.
Hey guys, hang on. I'm gonna join in. Hey, what platform are you guys on? Skype? FaceTime?
That's the invite.
I would have pulled the plug
Okay, now I can see
a
everybody.
few minutes ago.
Let's
when we used
reschedule
fun.
and let's just do a regular old conference call, okay? Paul, can you have David send out the 9-digit passcode? I heard you.
And he's been here the whole time.
All right, everybody. I'll see you later.
So yeah, technology isn't all good. You've got to use it, and you've got to be able to abandon it, and just go with a straight conference call or follow up by email.
We use it to hire, to do interviews for someone we want to hire, so a Skype interview for a job. So that can be a bit of a disadvantage for that person as well, or for us, because the communication is important.
You can.
We did freeze a lot as
It
well.
can. We used VC not that long ago. No, it's slightly different, Skype. But we had interviewed somebody who came into our Melbourne office, and we interviewed from Sydney. But one of the things that it did was, we hired her. My feedback was, it feels like she's already part of the team.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Anyway, but there was.
It was awkward.
Wasn't just the technology, but
She just kept talking, even though we'd frozen as well. But she just kept talking because she wasn't sure how we were receiving her, or being herself. She just kept talking. She could hear us, but we were all.
Yeah, you've got to leave that time at the start. and as the leader, you can't be racing through the door, and you know, because yeah. Anyway. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Can I ask a question? You know the sentence, many hands make light work. But in fact, the sentence that we use in the Koha community is many hands finish the work. Because when you come to the date when the new version has to be released, there is hours of work before that.
Yeah.
Do you think in your own experience you can measure how many of your tasks actually get completed? You know, how many projects in collaboration with others actually do come to an end?
I do, because I run that side of it. You know, like, so in any project that I'm running, I will end it, for good or bad. And sometimes the outcome is fail. You know, like it's. I think, you know, in that space, and as a leader, you actually have to fail publicly and well, to give your team that, to lose that fear. You know, like, unless you're in a culture where failure is, you know, but yeah.
So then you just reshelve it for another time?
Yep, or your recommendations are to not continue or to pull the pin.
Make a business
Yep.
case.
I've had to stop a project halfway through and change the team because it wasn't working. You know, in a different way. So you still kept that team going, but even though they weren't doing anything, but you actually then pulled out of that and got the work done in a different way, and then that dynamised the rest of the team.
How much do you do one-to-one communication to?
I do a lot because of the role that I have. So I spend maybe 3 days most weeks, some weeks none, some weeks more, working into the European time zones 3 nights a week. And for that, I actually have to be flexible, you know, and luckily presenteeism has never mattered to me or our workplace at the moment. So I'll either start normal and leave at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, go for a swim, have some time at home, and then log in at about 5 o'clock for the evening meetings.
So you work from home quite a bit?
I do work from home quite a bit. The other thing that we've started at our place is we've just opened a new office in Quarry Park, and it is an activity-based office. It is not hot desking, although it is hot desking. What it is that you don't have a desk, you have a locker, and across the floor print are all sorts of different spaces. Okay, now they can be traditional desks, they can be stand up and sit down desks. There's some huddle rooms. I haven't had a huddle yet, but they're for things that are not private, they're not shut in, and just low conversations. We've got collaboration spaces dotted throughout with round tables and whiteboards and things like that. It's actually lovely. People were terrified that it was hot desking, but most people are actually like, and I really like it, and that is actually bringing collaboration to it and flexible working. And an innovation hub, which is quite nice.
Breaks down the barriers that we have.
Breaks down the barriers. There's people we're working with that I've never seen in 10 years, you know. And it's sort of, you kind of have to do the meerkat every now and then going, Ben, are you here? You know, like, but...
But that comes back to what you were saying about actually getting on with people.
That's right.
In the beginning, I think you were mentioning that is a skill.
You do, and you need to be aware if somebody's actually sitting there and they've got all the barriers up and wanting to do their deep work, and some of the workspaces that we've got are locked doors and, you know, like containers. You've got to be sensitive, emotionally savvy to the signals that people are sending out, and not sort of go, you're ready to, So, yeah. But I think that is the future as well, where our work is going to be increasing. Some of those things, the trends are, longevity. You're going to have not so much a traditional career, but lots of experiences in the pathway for a long time.
Yeah.
What are the comments from the lawyers, from the staff? What are they saying? Do they see that this collaboration
To the activity-based?
Yes.
Yep. I once surveyed some of our lawyers, some of our smart partners. They're all smart. Some are smarter than others. For a paper that I wrote on ebooks years ago, and it was one of them said to me, Helen, we're natural collaborators in a place like this. He said, all we have to do is stick our head out the door and you'll have the Australian expert on contracts who will be able to help you with this pesky clause that you're trying to put together, right? Now, they haven't, things like a Yammer platform and things like that, we've been trying to get one of those in for about 10 years. Right? The first time we did it, we wouldn't have, 10 years ago, they would never have touched it. It's actually really quite successful to have that there as a connecting tool, not so much a collaboration tool, because you can't put up any confidential information on a platform like that. But it's a great way for them to connect with each other and raise their profile on what they're doing with each other, especially in this global thing. I don't think I've answered your question. I think I went somewhere else.
The benefit of being able to go 24 hours a day to have research questions and some assistance for it must be the first positive aspect of it, because they work also across.
They do love it. I mean, some of our guys in Sydney work 24 hours. That's their, like, depends what the work is, what the deadline is. Because that is one thing with law. If you're working to a court deadline, it's a hard deadline. There's no, getting the chapter to court 5 minutes late. It's too late.
Giving me an idea of what this game in our school library.
It's good. It is actually good.
Creating new space.
It's called activity-based working.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Thank you, Helen and Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Quite interesting. Thank you.